Welcome back to the Deal Room. Today's guest is Peter, an award winning brand strategist, TEDx speaker, former Coca Cola executive, Navy veteran, and founder of Thrive Alive AI. Pete has spent decades helping organizations expand, grow, and thrive through authentic storytelling and strategic brand development. Today, he's using AI to democratize access to mentorship and help individuals discover purpose and direction in life and in business. Pete, welcome.
Thank you. Great to be here. Looking forward to a fun conversation.
So, you began your career as a Navy pilot. How did military leadership shape the way you think about brands and about people?
Great question. I appreciate it. The thing I believe that really held me in great stead when I was flying in the Navy is the mindset of leadership and knowing that I was entrusted by my superiors to be able to do my mission wherever the Navy would send me, any ocean in the world, and conduct whatever operations that my aircraft was capable of executing, including surface surveillance of ocean ships or anti-submarine warfare, or even things like showing the flag and representing the country in a more collegial way. So as I think about my leadership and the work that I've done over the last 20, 25 years with branding, I think it all goes back to the idea of what does it mean to be a leader in a space, and how do you act with ruthless consistency and authenticity? And that's what I was taught as a midshipman at the Naval Academy, to act with honesty, integrity, character, and to, when I didn't know the answer, to say I didn't know it and I'd find out, or, that for me, not being afraid to challenge myself in areas where I may not know the answers, but I could go figure them out. There's a big theme of of teamwork that is part of leadership. And so working with others to create a better solution was something that I embraced. And in my aircraft, the P-3 Orion, which was the primary aircraft I flew, which was primary role was submarine hunting, we had a crew of 12. We flew over the ocean for missions up to 12 hours at a time. So for me, the idea that I can work with a team is something I really relish. I don't necessarily need to be the leader. I love others to be able to step into roles where they feel that they have the expertise, and I'm happy to follow behind them and support them in whatever capacity they need me to do. So I love the idea of working with multicultural, geographic teams where everybody brings a different perspective and collaborates to create a better solution.
That's interesting. Love to hear about the story of submarine hunting. That's very, very cool stuff. So after that, you worked with companies like Coca-Cola and Newell, some of the most recognizable brands in the world. What separates brands that become legendary from brands that kind of just disappear?
I love my time at the Coca-Cola Company and later at Knoll Brands, and in between. And I would say, it's interesting for me with my career. I started out leaving the Navy. I studied finance at business school, and then I became a financial analyst and worked in the Coca-Cola Treasury Department before I was able to go pursue my passion for marketing and branding. And that is part of the story of Thrive Alive. And I would say that the difference between brands that people know, love, cherish, want to consume, and those that never really break through are the things that make relationships like you and I have unique and cherished. When we meet a person or a brand, we go through a hierarchy. It starts with building awareness. We get to know each other. Then there's this area called trial, where we test things out. Well, that's the first meeting you have with someone. And then preference is the third level. And so that's where you had a meeting with someone and you enjoyed them and had shared a couple of stories. And then that led to this idea of loyalty. So now you've built from awareness to trial to preference to loyalty. So you are loyal to a brand, and you will take that brand over a competitor as long as that brand is available. And it's the idea of, hey, I want to go hang out with my best buddies. And if they're not available, there are other friends I'd like to enjoy my time with. And then after this idea of loyalty comes insistence. I'm only going to do this kind of thing with my best friend, or I'm only going to have, in my case, a Coca-Cola is the only form of cola that I will drink. I won't choose any competitors. Even if Coke is not available, I will choose another beverage. And then after, that idea of insistence, so loyalty to insistence, and then from insistency, there's this thing called advocacy, which is now you're putting your own personal reputation at risk because you believe so much in a brand that someone is going to have a positive experience, which is going to enhance your own reputation versus the opposite. And then finally, I coined this one. All the rest of those are out of a marketing book. But the last one I coined is called ownership or ownability. And that's the idea where we're so fanatical about a brand, we're saying, hey, that's my brand. You, the company, are stewards of that brand, but it's mine and don't mess with it. And we saw that happen going back to the Coca-Cola example back in I think it was 85 or 84, 85 when they changed the secret formula. And, everybody got up in arms about that. And then they moved back and they brought us back the old brand of Coca-Cola as Coca-Cola Classic. But we've seen it in other examples as well, where we're saying, hey, that's my brand. You're just a steward of it. So when brands build trust with us and they build an ongoing relationship of reliability, certainty, eliminating risk. We then move them along that hierarchy from just being aware of them to really liking them, to being loyal to them, to insisting on them, to advocating for them, and then ultimately feeling like they're ours. And so the great brands of the world, that's what we do. And by the way, when all that happens, we surround ourselves with those brands because those brands have a dynamic representation of who we are. So I'll give you my example. And it doesn't mean that mine's right and yours is wrong if you disagree with me. It just means for me, these brands mean something. So in my hand is an iPhone. I love Apple, and Apple is a great product. I have a MacBook computer that I use. To my right is a Yeti cup, and I love the Yeti brand because it does a phenomenal job of keeping my cold drinks cold and my hot drinks hot. I drive an Acura MDX. That vehicle has been with me for more than 15 years. I'm talking about getting a new vehicle, but it's been so reliable that I just can't see myself parting with it. And because it's all-wheel drive and has 3 rows, it can pretty much do anything I need it to do in any kind of weather. So you can see those brands represent me and help reflect who I am. And when we have brands that do those sorts of things, that's when we embrace them and we talk positively about them. Obviously, I'm advocating for these brands. I would suggest to anyone listening to this podcast that if they don't know those brands, that they should check them out. Now, the competitors to those brands may do the same kind of thing for someone else, and that's fine. It's just what did they do for me, and what will they do for others who think and feel like I do?
Very interesting. Well, you said a lot about brand, and I think a lot of companies, their challenge is that they feel that their brand is the logo, but it sounds like it's a whole lot more. Can you kind of talk about that a little bit and separate the and the dangers that might come with just thinking that the logo is your brand?
Oh, yeah. You see me shaking my head because unfortunately, this is in the mind of many individuals, whether they're business owners or just individuals who consume brands. They don't know that there's more to a brand than just its visible or physical representation, which is one element, not just all of it, but just one element is a logo. So a brand, as I talked about, builds a relationship with us as individuals. A logo is an element of what I would call a visual identity. A visual identity is the way that we see a brand, and we may see that visual identity digitally on a website, on a computer screen, on a phone, on a television program, at a feature film, on a computer. But we also see them physically, right? If it's a physical product, I was holding the iPhone earlier, the logo is right there in the back. But you clearly, the Apple brand, this phone is way more than that little symbol, right? So there's the physical manifestation of the brand. the physical product, if it is a product, or it could be a service, and then there's the way we represent it physically. So there could be a, a billboard sign, or a let's see what else manifests itself in the physical world. In the case of, go back to Coca-Cola, it could be a contour bottle, like the bottle itself that we drink out of, or it could be a contour glass, which is a representation that looks like the bottle that has intellectual property around it, the Coca-Cola company owns. So not only the Coca-Cola company can make a contour glass that is used for serving the beverage Coca-Cola. So we want to know what the logo is, and we want the logo to represent the brand, but it always starts with the brand and the brand strategy first. What does the brand stand for? How does it interact with us? What are the attributes, the benefits functionally and emotionally? What's the core message? What is the promise? And once we understand that and the story of the brand, and again, Coca-Cola's got such a rich story about about how it was created back in, Dr. Pemberton's, pharmacy back in 1886. And so that story is really important. And then who does the brand service? What problem does an individual or an organization have, and how does that brand solve the problem? That's the positioning of the brand. And so when we have all that, we want to represent the brand in a visual way, and that's called a visual identity. And part of the visual identity is the logo. But you can see the logo is just a representation. And you would never start with someone's opinion about what it should look like and then create the strategy. You would always start with the strategy. It's kind of like, don't put the cart before the horse, right? The horse needs to go first. The horse is pulling the cart. And so start with the brand strategy, which is brand story, brand architecture, brand positioning, and then have somebody who's really great at graphic design create a visual identity system, of which the logo is an element, to represent the words of the strategy that's created to represent the brand.
So, a bit of a transition. Part of that building of that brand, I believe, is something to do with figuring out what your purpose is first. And I know
Yeah.
you've talked about in the past about purpose. So, how
Yes.
does someone discover their purpose when they're stuck in transition and trying to figure it out?
I love that question, and thank you so much for giving it. It's interesting. I have two co-founders, Ernesto and Santiago, and we together have created this platform called Thrive Alive. And the idea was to make subject matter experts' knowledge available to individuals, organizations, anytime, anywhere, for high value, a fraction of the cost. And so, because I'm a brand strategist, when we got together as a team, my two co-founders said, okay, well, what do we start with? And I said, oh, that's easy. Before you can develop a brand strategy, you have to define purpose, vision, mission, and values. Frankly, I would say before you should do anything related to you as an individual or an organization, you should define purpose, vision, mission, values. What are they? What do they mean? Well, purpose is your why. Why do you do what you do? And comes out of what gives you a sense of meaning or significance, or gives you energy, right? The things that you get excited about. And so what I do is I probe individuals about themselves or their organizations. They really dig at the root of what that whole thing is, that it's around purpose. The way we don't always know it right off the surface, but we can see it when it becomes clear to us. And what do I mean by that? Well, when let's just you and I, Joe, right? We're together. We've been hanging out, and I know what excites you, right? And you've been working really hard for, let's just say, a week straight, probably putting in 10 to 12 to 14-hour days. And Friday afternoon comes and you're like comatose. You're so tired. But I know the one thing that you love to do. And I'm like, hey, Joe, let's go and let's insert something. Let's go shoot some pool. Maybe that's what it is that you love. And all of a sudden, the energy that was not to be found comes from somewhere, because what I'm tapping into is something that manifests who you are and what you're about. Now, it could be a lot of different things. I just used the idea around the game of pool, and the game of pool is a very complex game with geometry and energy and all that sort of thing. But it's also just a fun game to play. So that's the whole idea around purpose. It gives us our why. And then vision is this idea of what does the future look like when we're living with purpose or on purpose. So we want to create this visual destination so that we know in our minds, okay, if I'm living with purpose, this is where I get. And then that helps me be a much better decision maker because I have an idea where I'm going, right? That vision statement. And so when opportunities come my way, left or right, and maybe there's dangling significant dollars associated with those ideas or those opportunities, I have to say, will that opportunity help me get to my vision? Because I know my vision and I know my purpose, I can make that analysis and I can say to myself, you know what? Despite how attractive that looks financially, it will not get me where I need to go. And so therefore, I'm not going to do it. Now, mission is the how. So if purpose is the why and vision is the what, mission is the how. How do I get there? Who do I surround myself with? What kind of technology do I put in place? What kind of infrastructure do I have? How much resources do I need? And so all of those things, what kind of intellectual property do I need? In the work that I do, oftentimes I'll talk about licensing a brand. So like if you have a great product or service, but you're not well known, but you can help a brand go somewhere that they're supposed to be, and do it more efficiently, they may give you access to their brand, and that could be part of the how, right? The licensing element. And then finally, the piece that I think really helps keep us on the path is the values. I say values are our guardrails. We know when we're bumping up against them, and we know when we're compromising on them. So if we are clear on our values, what matters most, then we will know when we're getting in that gray area and we'll walk away from it or steer away from it. If you think about an automobile going down a highway with a guardrail on the right and the left, it's like, oh yeah, there's a steep ravine to the right or, a river to the left. I'm going to stay on the road. I'm not going to compromise who I am to get to my destination. The ends do not justify the means. So we have to figure out how to get there. And that's part of the mission part of the whole thing.
Those are a lot of important steps that need to be recognized. And I think sometimes companies are built without that forward thinking. So that's very helpful. Thank you for that. The next stage you've actually written books about and on brand licensing and expansion. What are some of the biggest mistakes companies make when they're trying to grow?
Yeah, I love that work. I cut my teeth at the Coca-Cola company, learning about branding through a job that I was given called an event merchandising manager, where I and my team were responsible for creating merchandise around our sponsorship of events like the Olympic Games and the FIFA World Cup, which is going on right now, and big platforms like NASCAR and others like that. And I learned, what became very interesting to me at the time was why would Coca-Cola want to spend money sponsoring these platforms? How does it benefit from that, right? The Coca-Cola brand is massive, it's global, it's everywhere. And then I realized when I got in the middle of these projects like the Olympic Games or FIFA World Cup, which most of us are watching and enjoying like crazy. And we're seeing the fans from all over the world with their passion, right? There's more passion in a football fan than probably any other sport, and that's what I got in the middle of. And of course, I mentioned NASCAR earlier. NASCAR fans are incredibly passionate. So the idea was the brand, saw those brands, the Olympics, FIFA World Cup, NASCAR, as three examples where the passion of what those people who love those sports had in common with the brand Coca-Cola. And Coca-Cola was about things like authenticity, realness, happiness, incredible taste, bringing the world together. And you looked at those brands and they're like, oh, a lot of those things, those attributes that I just described were part and parcel of those brands. So if we could bring the two together, we could really cement ourselves with people who love those sports and love the Coca-Cola brand, and maybe introduce ourselves to people who love the sport who had not met the Coca-Cola brand. And what better way to do that than to create really cool merchandise that was around the idea of, hey, capture a moment around this really special event you're at. Remember, I don't know what events you've gotten to go to, what things that really excite you, but those three, two of them especially, of the Olympic Games being probably the number one of the three of them. When you go to Olympic Games, when I go, I'm looking to capture some kind of memory, right, of that experience. And so you want that something that really is visually appealing, will stand the test of time, and will be that perfect gift or that perfect memento of that experience. And that's what we were trying to create. And so during those different events, we would do the traditional things like t-shirts and hats, but we also use the Coca-Cola contour bottle in its element with the Olympic logo on it. And so what I'm trying to show you there and to bring to life is this idea that when a brand can be represented in an experience that people love with passion, there is real excitement there and genuine love of it. And people will take those things and they will put them on their walls in their homes and they will look at them with fondness over years and they paid for that. And so when you get back to the question of like, why would a brand like Coca-Cola need to do it? Well, they don't need to. What they do is they want to because they want to say to somebody, hey, we're about happiness. And remember that experience you had in Nagano, Japan back in 1998 when you went into the Coca-Cola Olympic pin trading store and you bought a pin and you traded it with that gentleman from Norway and he shared another pin with you and you had this incredible experience you would never have had you not been in that little store in Nagano with that pin in your hand. How incredible is that? And that's what great brands do.
That's great. That's great. I love it. I love it. Well, and then with brands, obviously today we're in the AI revolution, and a lot of people have different opinions about AI. It's going to replace humans, or it's going to do this, it's going to create more jobs, or it's going to take away jobs, everything. Why did you decide to build Thrive Alive, and what problems is Thrive Alive trying to solve different than traditional coaching?
Yeah, I'm grateful for that question. I mentioned Ernesto and Santiago, my co-founders, and Ernesto was sitting in an audience back, oh my gosh, now almost 8 years ago. I had written a book called Expand, Grow, Thrive. It was about how brands literally do that. They expand, grow, and thrive. And it was all about brand strategy and why brands were important and how they used licensing to expand. And then ultimately, if they did it right, they would grow and then they would thrive. And so he was in this audience listening to me and he was like, I have a really cool technology. I need a brand to help me. And now that I've met Pete, he can maybe help guide me on how to acquire that brand. And that's when we had the chance to get together and talk about what I was doing and how I was doing it. And he said to himself first, like, this would be great if I could get Pete to help me. And then ultimately he said, okay, well, Pete, what's how do you work? And I said, well, I either have an hourly rate and we can work over a set number of hours, or we can agree to a project and I'll work on that project and we agree to a fee for that project. And so he asked me the question about both of those. And he said to himself, I learned later, oh, that's a little steep. I don't think I can afford that. But Pete's a reasonable guy and he's fun to hang out with. And maybe if I buy him breakfast or lunch, he'll share some more tidbits of knowledge. And I did. I was happy to do that. And finally, he came back to me, I think after the third meeting, and he said, hey, Pete, would you be open to the idea of democratizing your knowledge by using technology? And I had to think about what was he trying to tell me? And then I realized, okay, that just means sharing what I know, using using technology to do it. And I said, well, I'm already kind of doing that. I'm writing books that takes technology to create them and then publish them and send them out, whether they're physical or digital. I'm doing talks and that's me to a number of people. We're on this podcast, right? And depending who finds this, they'll hear what I have to share. And so the idea of using technology to share my knowledge was just in line with who I was and what I was about. And so we started probing on how to do this, and we finally got some like real crystallization of the idea. And that's when Ernesto said, hey, I think I know a great technology guy who can help us take this to the next level to be our third partner. And that was Santiago. And it was Santiago who said at the time, because we had never mentioned the word AI or the words AI, artificial intelligence. We were just like, what technology would be the best way of doing it? And we were contemplating other methods, and he said, I think we can use AI. And I was like, okay, well, what does that mean? And why would we want to do that? And then he said, well, we could create an authentic working experience with an expert using AI. And I'm like, well, that's pretty cool because what does that allow? if you're using AI, you can get on the platform anytime. You can get on the platform anywhere. And because it's using technology, you don't need to charge as much, right? Why do consultants charge so much? Maybe A, because they're that valuable and they can. That's probably a part of the reason. But the other parts of the reason are they have limited capacity and limited availability. And so that scarcity drives up the price. But if you can use technology to remove that, now you have an abundance of access, abundance of capacity, then you can make the price lower, service the world who needs your knowledge in such a way that you end up doing well by doing good. And that's why we wanted to create use AI. But it's the idea that AI plus human is better than AI and AI plus human is better than human. We want to keep the human part in, the expert part in. People want to work with experts because experts direct the individual to the things they need to know, right? The experts are the one with the knowledge to ask the questions. And then the individual can either answer the question or answer the question with a question. Like, I'm sorry, I didn't really understand your question. Can you rephrase it? Or can you give me an example of what you're talking about? And so you end up having this dialogue with this AI digital twin, which, by the way, the expert, the human expert, looks at and signs off on, says, yes, that representation of who I am in this authentic working session is how I would do it. And as asking the questions I would ask and is ensuring the answers to those questions are provided. So it is giving a person a replica experience. So that's what I get excited about. And the idea that I don't have to, I still love the idea of working with somebody individually like we're doing now, but they can get access to me whether I'm, in Hawaii or here in Atlanta or asleep or, doing, a fun activity like playing a sport because they're not actually talking to me. They're talking to my digital twin that I've signed off on. And so our goal for Thrive Alive is to put hundreds, if not thousands of experts on this platform with thousands, if not tens of thousands of modules. And we call them modules because what they are designed to do is provide a specific output for a specific outcome. So if we break these down into these little silos of knowledge, and you work with an expert to get a specific thing like a purpose statement or a vision statement or a set of values, then that piece of knowledge can then be used to execute certain things or to build a journey with that expert. Okay, now that you've defined that, let's work on the next piece, which is this, which is then works on the next piece. And you do it when you want to, for as long as you want to, come back when you want to. And it costs you a very insignificant amount relative to what it would cost to work with that expert.
Very, very interesting. So I can really resonate with that because as I say through most of my podcasts and for my listeners is the people that are going to be the most successful AI are the ones that are going to create authentic conversations like we're having right here between two human beings. And the question I have for you in that statement is, do you believe AI can make us more human rather than less human?
And my gut says no. We're not
Okay.
gonna I don't think AI is designed to humanize us. I think AI is a form of technology just like the internet was before we knew what it was, or before computers were, before we knew what they were, or maybe back to the way automobiles before the automobiles existed, right? So technology is always going to exist in different forms and it's going to improve our lives, hopefully. And we see that with the way that technology, or those examples I just gave, have modified our lives. We live way better than royalty did 300 years ago. All of us, right?
Sure.
But it doesn't make us more human. But what I like is if we can use technology to capture the essence of who someone is and how they work, we can create an authentic, as we're trying to do, authentic experience with that individual, a narrowly authentic experience. Now, maybe there's some incredible models out there that can capture the whole essence. I saw a picture today of somebody talking to President Theodore Roosevelt, and
No,
I
yeah.
thought that's pretty cool. I read his autobiography and loved the stories that were written about him and think he's amazing. But is it really exactly like him? Probably not, but it's way better than any other representation. So I think it's cool to do it. I think technology is amazing, and if it gets us closer, to an authentic experience, as long as we're doing it for good reasons, not nefarious
Mhm.
reasons, then I'm all in favor of it because we just like we like our entertainment, right? You get on to Netflix, for example, and you're like, okay, what am I in the mood for? Comedy, drama, thriller. Okay, let's just say it's, comedy. Do I want, listen to Will Ferrell? Do I want to listen to, some other comedian or what is it that I want? And then do I want a feature film or do I want a series? And so we get to choose all those things. Well, that's human nature, right? So if we on our platform, Thrive Alive, can put thousands of experts on there, and let's just say around the area of brand strategy, there's a dozen of them. Well, choose the one that you think you're going to want to work with the best because you connect with the way she writes or the way he speaks or just the approach they take, and you have that choice around a specific thing, specific module, and if that goes great, have more of it. And if you're like, it was good, but I'd like to try this other person, you could just do it. And it wouldn't take you but a few seconds and probably cost you a nominal amount. That's what technology offers. And that is, I guess, extending the human experience, which is a pretty cool thing to do.
Absolutely. Well, so you've worked with veterans, students, athletes, executives, and business owners. A lot of my listeners are real estate developers, real estate professionals, local businesses, and other consultants. What common identity struggles do you think these groups share that they're looking to
Well,
solve?
I think I think you nailed it in the head. It's this whole idea of identity. Who are we? Why do we exist? Those are some of the questions I try to get at in the purpose module that I develop, right? When somebody asks, and I've been asked this question, why do I exist? That's a pretty heady question. It's not really complex. Like there's a few words. Why do you exist? Four words, right? But the manifestation of the answer is really, really challenging. And so for some of us, in my case, with my personal faith, I'm like, okay, I know I'm created by an amazing God, his son. And as a Christian, I believe that he sent his son to be our savior. So it roots me in everything I do. So for me, that is the commonality that I can connect with others on. But when you talk about the group that you just mentioned, all of these different organizations, real estate investors, developers, maybe athletes or veterans, I think we're all curious about why are we doing what we're doing? Why does it matter? Where's our meaning? Where's our significance? I think those things are critical. And for those who haven't probed in those areas, then oftentimes are probably struggling with the work that they do. And I say work in generic terms, right? It could be something that is just takes up your time, but you're doing it. For those of us who can look at our businesses, regardless of what they are, and say, here's why I'm doing it. Here's the greater purpose in it. Those are the ones I believe that will get more meaning out of it and will deliver more value to whomever they're trying to serve. If it's an athlete on a field, there's a whole host of people he's maybe serving or she may be serving. It may be teammates, maybe coaches, maybe family, maybe people in the stands watching, right? I just enjoyed the heck out of watching the Wimbledon championships. I've played a lot of tennis when I was younger and just love that sport. And Wimbledon is, I think, the most special of all the professional tennis tournaments. And you listen to these people after they win their matches and talk to the crowd around them. And who do they thank, right? Like their family and the friends in their box and the fans and the ball boys and the ball girls. Why is everybody there, right? Like you look at those ball boys and ball girls, why are they there doing that? That's a pretty thankless job. But if they have meaning in why they're doing it, then it makes all the difference. And so I would say it really gets down to who are we? What is our identity? And if we can get rooted in that, all these other things can make sense. And we have this prism to look through and go, that aligns with who I am or it doesn't. And then taking the time to answer the questions that I pose or others pose to get to that clarity can be the difference between joy and, like existence. So we only have a few years on this earth. Why not choose joy? Why not know why we're here? Why not have an identity that we're really clear about?
Amen to that. So if someone listening today feels lost professionally or personally, Where should they start?
Well, I would love to help them. We would love to help them. It's a really pretty simple name of the company, thrivealive.ai. Thrive, THRIVE, alive, ALIVE.ai. If you land on that website, you will be taken on, a journey that starts with figuring out a little bit about yourself. We call it an exploration module. We are trying to get to know you as an individual so that we can tailor the questions and the way we ask them to your specific needs, maybe the style you like, or just the way that you want to be spoken to. And we take into consideration things like if you're married, if you have children, if you've served in the military, and how much education you've had. And then once we know that, we'll use it for all those good reasons. And you can step into any one of the modules we have, but we typically suggest you start with purpose, then vision, then mission, then values. And you can do them for yourself, or you can do them for your organization. And if you were in the military, then we have a whole military pathway because we know a lot of folks in the military are used to talking with specific terminology, and that terminology is really part of who they are. And it's important for us to be able to communicate with them in the same way that they are used to speaking about it. And we're excited about adding other modules all the time. So I would suggest to those who are listening who are subject matter experts themselves that have a methodology or a framework and they've been helping others, they should also reach out to us, get on the website. My email is pete@thrivealive.ai. Write me and let's have a conversation because this is about sharing our knowledge with the world. And how cool is that when we get to do that? If we love sharing our knowledge, if we've created a platform to help others, if we are a teacher, a coach, a mentor, a subject matter expert, consultant, or just somebody who likes to just share what they know. Many folks probably on YouTube are these kinds of people. Our platform could be a great place for you because now you can have an authentic digital twin of you representing you and having an engagement with someone, which is one step above just having them watch your video.
Very, very cool. Pete, I mean, I love the story. I love how you're showing branding and how it helps in generating purpose for business development and business growth. I think to sum it up, purpose drives identity, identity drives action, and action creates impact. And
Well,
that's what you're looking to prove in Thrive Alive. And love it and love your time on this podcast today. I really appreciate it and appreciate you sharing with us today your knowledge.
my pleasure, Joe. Thank you so much for making this opportunity available. It's been a huge pleasure.